All right, let's get ready to level up that public speaking. We're diving deep today into a chapter all about getting ready for giving speeches, those moments you're in the spotlight. Don't worry, though, this deep dive is going to unearth some really practical tips and just timeless wisdom from this chapter. Going to make you feel so much more confident and ready to go.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating to me is how this chapter, it doesn't just look at the mechanics of actually writing a speech,
Right.
but it goes into like the habits and the mindsets
Yeah.
of speakers who are really captivating. It really shows how preparation is this ongoing process, like you're always working on it.
It's true. They call it becoming a full soul speaker.
Yes.
And that really resonated with me when I read that.
Right.
Because the book argues that giving great speeches, it isn't just about some natural talent or charisma you're born with.
Right.
It's about this attitude they call specifically acquisitive. You're always absorbing knowledge from the world around you, always seeking new information and experiences.
Like a knowledge sponge.
Exactly.
Soaking up everything around you.
Yeah. And it makes a distinction, too, the source does, between just information and knowledge. It says information consists of a fact or a group of facts. Knowledge is organized information. So you got to be able to connect those dots, see how the things you learned fit together.
Yeah, it's not just about having all of these random facts crammed in your head. It's like understanding how they all work together.
Exactly.
How they relate to the bigger picture.
It reminds me of that story they share about Dr. Russell H. Conwell.
Oh, yeah.
This amazing speaker. He memorized huge chunks of John Milton's work, like while he was tending syrup pans.
Wow.
Makes you think, what are those kind of seemingly mundane tasks in your life that you could use for enriching your mind?
Right.
Maybe listen to an audiobook while you're doing laundry or practice a new language during your commute.
Absolutely. It's all about finding these pockets of time, hidden pockets of time.
Yeah.
Turn them into chances to grow and learn.
Yeah. And that leads us to, I think, another super crucial point the source makes. Time management.
Yes.
They call time speech capital, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
And they even quote Napoleon
Oh, wow.
saying, "Quarter hours decide the destinies of nations."
Intense.
I know, right? Pretty intense.
Yeah.
I don't know if my speeches are deciding the fate of nations, but I get it. Time is super valuable when you're prepping to give a speech.
Definitely. Even little bits of time, when you use them well, they can have a huge impact.
Totally.
And the source gives us some great examples of how, like, these historical figures, they really made the most of their time.
Right.
Daniel Webster, he used to read while he was working in a sawmill.
That's amazing.
Talk about multitasking.
Wow. And Patrick Henry,
Yeah.
the give me liberty or give me death guy, he would spend days just wandering around in nature, getting material for his speeches.
Wow.
Just observing and thinking. I bet those walks were where he came up with some of his most powerful ideas.
That's so cool. And the interesting thing is that each of these examples has a lesson for us, right?
Yeah.
Webster teaches us to use even those weird, unlikely moments to learn. Patrick Henry shows us how being observant and reflecting can spark your creativity.
Right.
And Robert Louis Stevenson, who saw every experience as like fuel for his writing, he reminds us to be mindful, be present in our daily lives.
Yeah.
To see every interaction as a chance to get inspired for your speeches.
I love that.
So, think about your routine. Could you even use 15 minutes on your commute to brainstorm ideas or practice key points?
I am feeling very inspired to be more intentional with my time.
Yes.
Now, I've always struggled with picking a topic, like what to even talk about. Do you have any tips for finding that perfect speech idea?
Well, actually, the source lays out two totally different ways to choose a topic.
Okay.
The first one they call arbitrary choice, which is basically just picking something from a list.
Okay, yeah, that sounds familiar. It's like those pick a topic for your essay assignments from back in school.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the source says there's a better way, a way that's more organic, more engaging.
Oh, okay.
They call it development from thought.
Okay, that sounds way more interesting.
Right.
Tell me more.
So this method's all about letting the theme come naturally from your interests, your passions, the stuff you think about. You don't force it. You just explore your thoughts and see what sparks your curiosity.
Okay.
They use this really cool analogy to show the difference between these two methods.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
Right. So imagine you're trying to help a lost kid find their way home.
Okay.
If you just start throwing out street names randomly, you're probably not going to get anywhere.
Right, right.
But if you listen to the kid, look around, let them guide you based on what they remember, you've got a much better shot at getting them home.
That's a great analogy.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the heart of the development from thought method. You let your own interests, your experiences lead you to the perfect topic. And when that happens, they say, one strong idea seems to grasp the soul.
Wow.
It's like the topic chooses you. It's saying, arise, I am your theme.
Oh.
And honestly, I've always found that when I'm really passionate about a topic, the whole process of writing and giving the speech just becomes so much more enjoyable and powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how do you usually go about picking your speech topics?
Honestly, I tend to fall back on that arbitrary choice thing. I'll pick something from a list.
Uh-huh.
But after hearing that analogy, I'm realizing I might be missing out on some deeper, more authentic topics. I need to try that development from thought approach.
I think you'd be surprised what you come up with.
Now, once you do have your topic, though, how do you make sure it actually connects with your audience?
That's where matching speech to occasion comes in. A great speech, it's more than just a good topic. It's got to fit the context. You know, the source emphasizes, like, a speaker should never be a square peg in a round hole.
I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to think about who you're talking to, the purpose of the event, the logistics, everything.
So, like, what kind of questions should we be asking ourselves?
Well, they give a whole checklist. What's the specific goal of this event? Who's in the audience? What do they care about? What are they expecting to hear? Where's the speech taking place? How much time do you have? All that stuff.
Have you ever been to a speech where it felt totally out of place, like that square peg, round hole thing?
Oh, for sure. I went to this conference once, and the speaker went on this long, super technical tangent. Had nothing to do with what the audience was interested in.
Uh-huh.
People were on their phones, looking bored. Some even walked out.
Oof.
It was such a clear reminder that even if you have brilliant content, if it's not tailored to the occasion and the audience, it's just going to fall flat.
So then how do you make sure your speech is well structured, that it doesn't fall apart before you even get to your main point?
That's what the next part of the chapter is all about. They compare structuring a speech to architecture, which I think is so smart.
Okay, I'm picturing blueprints now.
Right.
Go
Like
ahead.
you wouldn't want to spend most of your budget on just the entryway of a building, right?
Exactly.
And that's what they say. They're like, you don't want to blow 80% of your budget on the house's vestibule.
Yeah.
You got to be strategic, know which part of your speech deserves the most, like building material, you know, the most time, attention.
Makes sense.
It's about pacing yourself so you don't run out of steam before you get to the heart of what you want to say.
Have you ever heard a speech that felt totally unbalanced? Like they
Yeah.
spent way too long on the intro and then had to rush through all the main points?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's so frustrating.
It is, but when a speech is well structured, it feels like a journey. It takes the audience on this clear, compelling path to a satisfying end.
It's true. And when a speech is well structured, it can be so impactful and memorable.
Absolutely. And one of the keys to really bringing a speech to life is doing your own original research, which is what the next section of the chapter dives into.
Yeah.
It really is all about doing that original research and becoming what they call a speech detective.
I love that. Like
Yeah.
putting on your little Sherlock Holmes hat
Right?
and digging way deeper than just like a quick Google search.
Exactly. It's about uncovering these unique facts, these insights that really grab the audience. There's this line in the chapter that just stuck with me.
Okay.
It says, I have examined the employment rolls of every mill in this district and find that 32% of the children employed are under the legal age.
Wow.
You can imagine the power of a statement like that.
Yeah.
It's not just citing someone else's statistics, it's firsthand knowledge, and that makes all the difference.
That's true. You come across as so much more credible. But where do you even start with original research?
Right.
Like if you don't have a whole team of researchers?
Yeah, well, the chapter actually has some surprisingly practical advice for making the most of your own library,
Great.
even if it's just your own little personal collection. It encourages us to really explore, like go beyond those few books you always reach for,
Yeah.
to browse and discover hidden gems.
You know, I am definitely guilty of just sticking to the same few books on my shelf. I love that idea of getting lost in a library or even in my own bookshelves and seeing what I might find.
It's fun.
What kind of browsing techniques do they suggest?
Well, they talk about the power of the table of contents,
Okay.
and the index.
Oh, right.
So instead of just reading the chapters that seem relevant, actually take a look at the table of contents,
Yeah.
see what other topics kind of jump out at you. The index can be amazing too.
Oh, yeah.
You find unexpected connections, keywords. It can really spark new ideas.
I never think to use the index.
It's a gold mine. They even suggest just randomly flipping through pages.
What?
Yeah,
Really?
just to see what you find. Those serendipitous insights.
That's awesome. It's like giving yourself permission to be a kid in a candy store again.
It is.
Just exploring with no plan.
And they give this great example of someone researching the topic of thinking.
Okay.
So they start with books specifically about thinking.
Right.
But then they branch out, psychology, the human intellect. They even look at dictionaries of quotations.
Oh, wow.
And suddenly their research just explodes.
Right.
They're making all these connections from all these different sources.
I love that. It's like following a trail of breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
One idea leads you to another and another.
And then you've got this whole rich tapestry of knowledge.
Speaking of weaving things together, that's where I always get stuck.
Where's that?
Organization.
Uh-huh.
I'm great at taking notes, bookmarking articles, highlighting passages, but then I've got this mountain of information and no idea how to turn it into an actual speech.
Ah, yes, the classic organizational struggle. Well, the chapter actually has a really simple solution for this.
What's that?
A good old-fashioned index card system.
Wait, really? Index cards?
Yes. Don't underestimate those little cards.
Okay.
The idea is write down each idea, each fact, quote, anecdote, anything you want to use on a separate card.
Okay.
Then you get some envelopes and label them with categories for your speech.
I'm starting to see how this could work.
Right.
It's like a physical model of your speech.
Exact.
Each card is a little building block.
Yep. You can move things around, add new cards, take some away. It's so much more flexible than trying to organize everything on a computer.
I can see that.
And you can get super creative with the system, use different color cards for different categories or color-coded pens for different sources.
So,
They even suggest using different ink colors for books from your own library versus books from the public library.
wow, that's so smart.
It's all about making a system that works for you, something visual, something tactile.
I love that. I can picture myself spreading out all these colorful index cards on my desk.
Yes.
Like a mad scientist concocting the perfect speech.
I love it.
But once you've got all your research organized,
Yeah.
how do you actually start turning it into a cohesive narrative?
Mm-hmm.
Like outlining is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I always get lost. I'm just moving words around on a page with no real direction.
I get that. Outlining can be tough, but the chapter breaks it down into a few key steps.
Okay.
The first is figuring out your central thoughts.
Okay.
These are the big ideas,
Yeah.
like the chapters of your book.
Right.
Think of them as the pillars of your speech.
Got it. So you start by figuring out the main points you want to get across before getting bogged down in all the details.
Exactly. And then you arrange those central thoughts in a logical order that builds to a strong climax. Think of it like telling a story. You need a beginning, a middle, an end that flows well, keeps the audience engaged.
I love that. Outlining suddenly seems a lot less like a chore and more like creative storytelling.
And once you have those central thoughts, you start grouping your supporting material under each one.
Okay.
This is where your index cards come in handy.
Right.
You can literally lay them out, visually connect each piece of evidence or anecdote to its main point.
That's brilliant.
It's like building a house brick by brick. The central thoughts are your foundation, and the supporting material is the framework that gives it shape and substance.
Perfect analogy.
And once you have that framework, you can polish your language, make transitions, work on your delivery. But none of that matters if you haven't spent time crafting a good title.
Oh, the title. Something I always leave until the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
This chapter makes it clear that it's more important than I thought. It's that first impression.
It is the first impression. The source talks about three main approaches: the direct theme, symbolism, and the catchy phrase.
I'm curious, what are some examples of those?
Sure. For a direct theme, think of Henry Watterson's The New Americanism. Straightforward, tells you exactly what to expect. Then there's symbolism, like Russell Conwell's Acres of Diamonds.
Right.
Evokes a sense of possibility, intrigue.
Yeah.
And then the catchy phrase like Albert Beveridge's Pass Prosperity Around.
I like that.
Memorable, a little provocative.
It's true. The right title, it doesn't just capture the essence of your speech, but it makes the audience curious.
He does.
Like a little teaser to make them want to hear more.
Exactly. And speaking of wanting to hear more, the chapter doesn't stop there. It goes into the whole process of crafting a strong introduction to hook your audience from the very first word. They call it the approach. It's all about creating that connection with your audience right from the start.
So you're not just jumping into your main points right away.
Nope. It's like there's this art to that initial engagement, you know?
Yeah.
The chapter highlights different ways to do it, like starting with a captivating story or a question that really makes them think, or even just a striking statement that grabs their attention. They even suggest using humor.
To lighten things up and build rapport. It's all about setting the right tone, making them curious and excited to hear what you have to say.
That makes total sense. If you can grab their attention right off the bat, you're already halfway there, right?
Totally.
Ah.
And once you've got that approach down, the chapter goes into all the details of structuring your speech,
Okay.
like how to make strong transitions and build to that big climax. It's like a step-by-step guide to making sure your message really sticks with people.
This has been such an amazing deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about public speaking in a whole new way.
Me too.
It's not just about memorizing words or projecting your voice.
Right.
It's about constantly learning and preparing thoughtfully.
It really is. And I love that this chapter reminds us that being a good speaker is a skill. You can work on it and get better through practice and by really wanting to connect with your audience.
What's really cool is that it's not just for like professional speakers or people giving formal presentations.
Yeah.
These principles can apply to any kind of communication.
Team meetings, pitching an idea to a client, even just talking to friends.
You know, one thing that really struck me was how much the chapter emphasized this idea of the speaker's purpose in everything we do.
What does that mean exactly?
It's about being present and observant and intentional in how we interact with people. Always looking for those little bits of knowledge and inspiration we can use in our communication.
So it's like we're all storytellers in a way, gathering material from our lives and using our voices to share our perspectives with the world.
Exactly. And that brings me to a final thought I wanted to share. The source material encourages us to cultivate that speaker's purpose in everything we do. But what if we took it a step further?
Yeah.
What if we started thinking about a listener's purpose?
Oh, wow.
How would that change things?
That's a great question.
Do you think it would make us not only better speakers, but better thinkers and communicators overall?
You know, I think it's really easy to get caught up in our own heads and what we want to say, that we forget to truly listen to other people.
It's so true.
But if we approach every conversation with a genuine desire to understand the other person's point of view, to really hear them, I think it could completely change the way we communicate.
Imagine how much richer our conversations would be.
Yeah,
How much more we'd learn, how much stronger our connections would be.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's definitely something I'm going to try to do more of. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. But keep those minds working.
Yes.
Keep asking those questions and keep diving deep. You never know what incredible things you'll discover.
And don't keep it all to yourself.
Right.
Share what you learn. Knowledge is most valuable when it's shared and discussed. Until next time, keep those minds engaged and those voices strong.